Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India. Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaste. In this session we are going to talk about salary and compensation management. We are going to discuss how salary is determined and how it is connected to the motivation and strategic aspect of work. First we are going to explain how to apply some of the motivation theories in formulating incentive plans. Then we will discuss the main incentives for the individual employees. We will discuss the pros and cons of the commission versus strategic straight pay. We will describe the main incentives for managers and executives and name and describe most popular incentive plans. So, these are the learning objectives for this session as well as in the next session, where we are going to talk about the incentive plans and the variable aspect of the pay. In today's session, we are going to look at how salary is determined, but before we discuss how salary is determined, we need to understand how we connect with salary and compensation at psychological level, and that aspect is explained in few motivation theories. We need to understand that monetary aspect of work or salary or compensation, at one level they are connected with the strategy. Basically, compensation is a way to drive the employee's behavior towards valued organizational goals. So, it has a strategic implication. We are going to discuss little more on the strategic implication. At the same time, salary is something which gives a sense of value and sense of connectedness with the job. So, it is connected to the psychological aspect as well, and it is determined based on the performance. It is not always about money. Salary and compensation also include non-financial aspects as well. So, you can see that at one level it is connected to the individual performance and individual connection with the work, and at macro level it is connected with the organizational strategy. Zander has explained this connection in his very famous HBR article by showing the connection between business environment, business strategy, pricing strategy, HR strategy, and how it determines or affect the employee behavior. So, Zander explains that business environment is, so he gives example that sales based on trust and individual network, intuition based assessment, globally mobile talent and globally volatile market. These are some of the features of the currently evolving business environment. These features are affecting the business strategy, and he explains that nothing comes in the way of providing our clients with the best candidate for the job. So, this is an example of a case study company which is explained in the Zander's paper. Like this, all the organizations have to decide what is their strategy, what are their strategic value proposition to the client, and what is their strategic value proposition at the marketplace. Based on that, they decide the pricing of their offering, and based on that only they decide about the HR strategy. Pricing is about how you charge from the customer, and HR strategy related to compensation is how much money, how much expenses you make for your employees to provide the excellent service, so that their behavior is something which helps organization to achieve its strategic objective. So, compensation can be based on seniority or worldwide profit. So, this is the example of this company which is given. Recruitment in this company was based on the personality suited for the teamwork, and as a result of that Zender shows that loyalty and collaboration increased and there was less than 2% employee attrition. If we have to have a general understanding about the strategy and compensation, we can understand it through these three examples. If organizational objective or strategic objective is to promote profitable growth, then most likely compensation should be tied to the sales and gross margin, and it should be tied to equity reward and achievement of economic profit and long term stock appreciation, because profitable growth is not an objective for few quarters or 1 or 2 years. Generally organization which is on the path of growth, they aim at growth in many years. So, it is important to connect compensation and rewards with the long term performance of the organization. So, as a result of that, long term stock appreciation can be linked with the long term economic realization of the stock options. So, this is one example. Another example is of an organization which is aiming at business turnaround. Now, turnaround is a phase, or turnaround is that situation where it is the emphasis of organization is not to generate more and more revenue, the emphasis is more on making the cash available and ensuring that organization survives. If that is the situation, then compensation should shift its emphasis from the revenue and net income growth to free cash flow generation and expense management. If the strategic objective of organization is to transform the business, if transforming business is the objective, then management pay contingent should be on executing the strategy, and executing the strategy meaning it might be related to entering new product markets, it might be changing sales channels, expanding geographical reach. In the performance management system, we discuss a case of Citibank. This case of Citibank is situated in 1996, wherein organization decided to be a kind of a financial supermarket, a organization which provides end to end financial product and services to its clients. So, as a result, they focused their performance management, which was primarily around financial performance of the branch, of financial performance of the organization. They shifted to multiple objectives. So, Citibank at that time adopted the objectives like strategic implementation, customer satisfaction, audit performance, along with the finance and revenue. All these heads were given equal importance as it was given to the financial performance. So, this is an example of and as a result of that, with this change in the performance management, they also made changes in the compensation management. So, earlier the compensation management and the variable component of the compensation management for the managers of the branch was primarily focused on the revenue generation and profitability of the branch. After the implementation of the new strategy, the compensation of the managers shifted only from financial and revenue performance to strategic implementation and customer service as well. So, in this way we can see that strategy changes the performance management system, and the change in the performance management system can be shown and can be ensured by changing the necessary salary and compensation management. We need to think about the scientific management at this moment. Definition of fierce day work, which is considered the norm today, it came up with the scientific management of Frederick Taylor in the 19th century. Frederick Taylor also popularized and implemented the improvement of the work method based on the best way to work. So, he popularized the time and motion studies. Based on that, he identified one best way of doing work at multiple stations, and accordingly the salary and compensation were decided. So, this was all part of the scientific management which was proposed by Frederick Taylor. On the compensation side, he introduced the practice of giving the financial incentives for those who exceed the normal output. So, those who achieve the productivity at some level, that was linked to the basic pay, and over and above that, if they produce more number of pieces or they complete more number of jobs, the incentives were introduced. So, employees became motivated to complete their basic required job, and then in the remaining time increase their productivity, so that they can earn much more money than they would usually earn in the normal day of work. One example is really eye opening, that is of the Ford. Ford Motors in 1913 used to pay $2.50 per day to its shop floor workers. The average workforce in the Ford on that pay was about 13,623. Total leaving means total number of leaves being taken by the employees in a year were 50,448. The turnover rate of employees were really very high, 370%. That means approximately 4 times of the people used to leave the organization in comparison to the people who would remain in the organization or who would join the organization. On an average, 10% people on the shop floor on every day used to be absent. Come next year 1914, he increased the pay from $2.50 to $5 per day, and there was a phenomenal change in all the parameters. The average workforce, that number decreased to 12,115. Total leaving, the total number of leave being claimed by different employees, that fell drastically from 50,000 plus to about 6,500, and employee turnover decreased from 370% to 54%, means people were just not willing to, that means people were not at all keen to leave the company. So, half of the people remained with the company even after completion of 1 year, and this practice continued. In 2015, they continued to pay $5 per day. Their average workforce increased to 18,000. So, naturally the productivity also would have increased, because total leaving even came down. So, please see that about 30% of the employee actually increased on the shop floor, though the total number of leaves being claimed by employee became less than 1/3 of 1914, and employee turnover further decreased to 16%. If you look at this percentage of 16%, that is acceptable even in some of the industries in current times. And absenteeism, people were mostly showing up the work almost every day until there is a really genuine reason, and that is reflected in their absenteeism. On a given day there would be 2.5% people absent, almost everybody would show up until there is a genuine emergency or urgency at their place. So, you can see with this example that change in the salary can make people behave very differently at workplace. As a result of that, organization performance can drastically be changed. Nonetheless, we must understand that this mathematics is not very straightforward. We need to look at some other factors as well before expecting that change in the compensation and salary can bring about significant positive value adding change at workplace. Modern example is of the Costco Wholesale and Sam's Club. This was given in the Casio's paper. These 2-3 slides I have taken from the content developed by Professor Zubin Mullah from the TISS, so I pay thanks to him. This example of Sam's Club and Costco conveys almost same thing which we tried to understand looking at the example of Ford Motors. The Sam's Club average salary was $10 per hour. Costco increased the salary to $17 per hour. Healthcare was something which Costco became more generous, and they gave 85% and up to the limit of 5,000. So, on an average they paid $5,735 per annum for the health care of the employees. In comparison to Costco, Sam spent much lesser on the health care. So, Sam was giving lesser average salary and it was spending less amount, fairly almost 30% lesser amount than Costco on health care. Retirement plan, again Sam's retirement plan was 60% to get $7,747 per annum, whereas Costco's retirement plan is much better, 91% were eligible and $1,330 were allocated annually in the per employee basis on the Costco's retirement plan. Employee turnover was 1/3 in Costco, and Casio attribute this employee turnover primarily to the compensation and salary given by Costco. 1.7% sales was the shrinkage ratio, whereas in Costco the shrinkage ratio was much lesser, it is 0.2%. Looking at this data more carefully, Casio conclude that investment in the higher wage is worthwhile only if the total employee cost is optimized. So, we cannot exceed the total employee cost versus revenue ratio, that has to remain within the limits. Remaining in that limit, if we pay more, we can expect more productivity, less absenteeism and less employee turnover. So, total employee cost in the Sam's Club was 10.23% of the revenue, whereas the total employee cost in the Costco was 7.26% of the revenue. Indirect cost and the direct cost, that has to be looked at more carefully. Here you will see the indirect cost which is attrition and shrinkage, that was much more in Sam's Club, whereas the direct cost was not of much different. The direct cost to the employer, because of the direct cost of the employees for the employer was almost comparable, 6.25 and 5.25, whereas the indirect cost was much more in the Sam's Club, and that can be attributed to its total employee cost and other indicators which we just mentioned. So, we need to look at the boundary about the permissible limit of employee cost versus revenue. Within that limit, if we increase the compensation judiciously, we take care of the employees by giving them more facilities, giving them more economic security, giving them more salary directly or indirectly, that has impact on the productivity of the employee. Now, we must look at some of the motivation theories and some of the theories which we discussed in course of OB, how they impact the incentives and how they determine the perception about people and in turn satisfaction about the employees with the salary and compensation. The first part is the first thing come to our mind is Hirschberg's two factor theory. Most of you remember Hirschberg hygiene and motivation factor. what it says is that there are hygiene factors which are preventer of the dissatisfaction. If they are not present, dissatisfaction will increase. So, the hygiene factors are like salary is considered a hygiene factor, use of technology, the cleanliness of work, the work facilities, proper instruments, these are the hygiene factors. If they are not there, people will feel dissatisfied, but they may not necessarily feel satisfied about the workplace. Whereas motivators are altogether different factors which actually cause motivation. They may not prevent the dissatisfaction if the hygiene factors are not present, but they can increase the motivation, and those motivating factors are challenging assignment, availability of feedback, growth opportunity at work. However, we must understand that motivators do not foster the motivation if the hygiene factors are not present. For motivators to foster motivation, we need to have hygiene factors present at workplace. Motivation and incentives can be understood by the expectancy theory of the Victor Vroom as well. Expectancy theory talks about three factors: expectancy, instrumentality and valence. Expectancy meaning employees understanding about how much is the strong linkage is present between his effort, her effort and the desired level of performance. Instrumentality is performance and reward connection, meaning his clarity of perception, his conviction about availability of reward if he or she performs to expected level, and valence, whether that reward is valuable for that person or not. People in the different stages of the career and people in the different stages of their family may value different kinds of rewards. So, in the compensation we need to take care of these aspects, and that can have the significant impact on the performance management and the motivation level of the employees. Equity theory is perhaps most important theory in the field of salary and compensation, because it impacts its impact is very first level, its impact is very evident. What it says is that employees are motivated and they are constantly comparing themselves and their effort and salary with that of being offered in the similar jobs within the organization and outside of the organization. So, equity can be of four types, we can understand them as four types. External equity, is comparison of the employee's salary at the same level of the employees of the other organization. Internal equity is comparing employees' salary and compensation with the people internal to the organization. Individual equity is about employees' perception about salary and compensation and sense of equity with the people holding similar job within the organization, and also the procedural equity, which is about the procedure with which salary is determined, compensations are determined and disbursed. To ensure these type of equity, we can look at different data, we have to consider many of these aspects to ensure that employee look at their salary and compensation as equitable affair. So, for the external equity we must refer the salary surveys. We are going to talk about salary surveys in a short while from now. To ensure the internal equity, we need to have thoroughly designed job analysis and the salary bands. If bands and job analysis are properly matched, there will be a sense of internal equity within the organization. Individual equity can be maintained by proper performance appraisal system. If performance appraisal gives a true picture or nearly true picture of performance and compensation is connected well meaning logically and justifiably with the performance appraisal and performance management, people will look at their salary and compensation, they will consider it fair, and that will ensure the individual equity. Procedural equity is organizations and particularly that of HR departments communication with the employees about grievance mechanisms, how salary is determined, how salary is a salary system is revised, how it is connected to the different systems like job analysis or performance management. When these procedures are clearly laid out and communicated to the employee, we can ensure the procedural equity in the salary and compensation management. We need to consider the legal consideration in the salary and compensation. At this moment, there is a Code of Wages Bill 2017 which was introduced in 2017 in Lok Sabha, that has yet to be notified, and that is the combination that subsumes actually the Minimum Wages Act, Payment of Wages Act, Payment of Bonus Act and Equal Remuneration Act of India. There were many provisions, and in spite of so many provisions and so many laws, the number of people who were covered under these laws were of very few percentage in comparison to the number of people actually constitute the workforce in India. So, Code of Wages Bill is supposed to be much broad based, it is likely to cover large number of most of the people in the employment arrangement, in an employment relationship. So, we hope that once it is notified, we will have a better regulatory structure and clearly hassle free straightforward regulatory structure about deciding the compensation. Under this law, there will be a constitution of the consultative mechanism, there will be a central advisory board, and that board will be populated by the representatives of the employers and employees, experts of HR, and they are going to fix the salary and compensation according to the geography, maybe according to industry, according to the market. So, the job of fixing the salary and compensation will not be of government, but this central advisory board which is likely to be set up in the Code on Wages Bill 2017. Compensation policy issues are complicated. We need to consider so many factors before we decide upon the salary and compensation. Pay for performance. What percentage of payment should be based on the performance and what percentage of the compensation should be fixed? That is a tricky question. Should we give payment rise based on seniority, only seniority, promotion, only promotion, where the seniority will be applicable, where the competency will be applicable, where we can ignore the seniority totally? All these questions have to be considered before we finalize the compensation plan in the organizations. Pay cycle, different people, different kind of employees may expect different kind of the pay cycles. Some may prefer weekly cycle, for some jobs monthly cycle is more appropriate, and that is only for the basic pay, that is only for the fixed pay. But there are many types of incentive plans, financial as well as non-financial incentive plans. What should be the cycle for disbursing the financial and non-financial incentives which are other than fixed salary? This is another very important decision which organization has to make based on the profile of the job and based on the industry, market dynamics and the strategy this organization is following. Salary increase and promotions according to the career management stages. How fast we can give the promotion? Should promotion, to what extent the promotion should be linked with the salary? How we take care of the different bands, different levels of the hierarchy and the rise of the salary? That is another intriguing question about this issue of the compensation. Questions of the work day, what will constitute a work day? can employer expect that you are on the job 24/7 even if your office hours are 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. or what will be considered overtime, what can be considered on the job. These questions also have to be decided according to the nature of the employee, nature of the profession, nature of the organization. Probationary pay, will probationers in the organization will get full pay or partial pay, or what will be the major component of their payment? That is another interesting question, another important question to be dealt with. How much paid and unpaid leave will be available? There are different types of leaves, casual leaves, earned leaves and medical leaves are most prominent, but there can be other types like sabbatical, like study leaves. Whether that can be part of the compensation, how you convey this, how you make the part of the overall package, this is another question which has to be decided in a salary and compensation system. Salary compression, just and fair salary band for senior employees and new recruits. You might have seen in situations where new recruits from MBA colleges at times are recruited on a salary for a particular position on which senior employees are getting much lesser even if they are working in the organization for maybe so many years. How we can ensure that senior employees who were employed at much lower level of scale, with the increase in promotion, with the increase in the yearly salary, they reach to some level, whereas the new recruit might be getting the starting package which is more than the senior employees package who are working on the similar position. How we challenge, how we address this challenge, how we address this complexity and ensure that senior employees do not feel demotivated. For that we need to do salary compression, and that is again a very important aspect of the pay and compensation management. Another aspect is geographic cost of the living differences across the cities. One organization may employ people in Mumbai, Bangalore, Baroda, Jabalpur, Bhopal, Hoshangabad. In many different type of cities, they need different level of money to take care of their household expenses. So, how the salary will be different for the similar level of employees across the city is another question in the salary and compensation management. Just for an example, so the percentage of the HRA is different in India in different cities. So, cities with more than 50 lakh of population, HRA is 24% of the basic pay in the government jobs. For the cities which have population between 5 lakhs to 50 lakhs, their HRA is 16% of their basic pay, and for the employees living in the cities lesser than 5 lakhs of population, their HRA happens to be 8% of the basic pay. So, these kind of decisions have to be made according to the geographic cost and the differences causing because of the geography for the employees in the same organization working in the similar level, holding similar kind of jobs. Compensating expatriate employee, that also a complicated question, and that also is a part of the salary and compensation management. Different organizations can adopt different kind of strategy depending on in which part of the globe they are placing the employee. So, home versus host based salary. If we look at the example of Indian multinational which is employing some manager in Britain, in Zambia and in India, what should be the pay package of the salary of that kind of expatriate? We can expect that an employee who is going on the behalf to run the operations in Britain, most likely they will be compensated based on the host based account, meaning their salary should be comparable with the British society and British industry, whereas if they are placed in Zambia or some part of Africa where the average employee where the average where the cost of living is much lesser, but the average salary is also much lesser, in those countries Indian manager would not like to go until the home based salary strategy is adopted, and not only home based salary strategy, they must be given compensation for the relocation, they must be given the facility for the they must, and they also expect that tax burden in the two countries and the difference caused because of that must be beared by the employer. So these are some of the questions important to decide about the salary and compensation. So you can understand that compensation decisions are very complicated. We need to consider many factors before we decide upon the salary or compensation of the executives and managers. So you can understand that salary and compensation management is a complex issue. We need to answer so many questions, we need to consider so many factors before we fix on the salary and compensation of the executives and managers. Nonetheless, we will look at these factors systematically, and first thing to be considered is how we decide on the basic pay or strategic pay. Then we will look at how the different other components of the salary and wage structures can be decided. Most likely that will be discussed in the next session. In this session, now we will focus on how the salary is fixed, how the basic salary is fixed in business organizations, and for that organizations adopt generally the combination of two approaches, market based approach and job evaluation based approaches. A step in deciding the pay are as follows. It starts with the salary survey, understanding how much market is paying for a particular job. Second step is job evaluation, to know what are the compensable factors in the job. Third step is bundling the jobs. We cannot have the 200 type of salaries for the 200 employees working in organization. So different jobs have to be clubbed and salary and compensation have to be decided according to that band. So that is the third step in the deciding the pay rates. Fourth is pricing each pay grade by using the wage curve. We are going to discuss wage curve in this session, and fine tuning the pay rates. So these are the 5 steps to establish the pay rates that is primarily applicable to decide the basic pay in any job. There are multiple sources to of salary surveys. First is employer or organization can conduct survey of its own to understand who is paying what, how much for a particular job in the market. Secondly, recruitment in salary and compensation consultants, they also keep conducting the surveys because they are constantly interacting with large number of employers in the market, so they can collect information and that helps their clients as well for benchmarking the salary. One example is the Mercer India, they publish total remuneration survey almost every year or alternate years. Professional bodies like CII, NESCOM, they may also facilitate or conduct the salary surveys. So a famous example is IT BPM compensation benchmarking survey that was conducted by Deloitte, but it was commissioned by NESCOM. NESCOM is a body which represents the software companies, mostly it takes care of the well-being of the smaller software companies. So the survey like this gives idea to everybody in the industry who is paying what, how much is being paid for a particular job. These are some other websites you can have a look, salary.com, WageWeb, Paycheck India, moving.com, HT, the shine.com. These are some well known sources for the salary survey and each have some pros and cons. I will suggest please read this slide carefully you can easily understand what these websites provide and what are the downsides of these websites. So, accordingly you can decide which website to use for what purpose, how to source the information about salary and how to make sense of that information. So, that this slide can be the reference. Like most of the content in this session also, we have drawn heavily from the book by Dessler and Biju Worke, the Pearson publication, the titled as Human Resource Management. So, this slide is also taken from that book. Second step is job evaluation. When we say job evaluation, it means looking at what are the skills, knowledge, responsibility and working conditions involved in that job. Skills can be sales, negotiation, operating on a machine, operating on a software for example. Knowledge for example may be about strategic management, operations planning, sales planning. These are the kind of knowledge sources we expect any job will entail. Criticality of the responsibility, how much judgment, decision making, people management is involved in that job, and working condition, what is the kind of working condition person has to go through. It is a 24/7 kind of job, is the job going to be in a tough climatic situation, etc. So, we need to consider all these factors before in the process of job evaluation. Preparing for the job evaluation requires identifying the need for job evaluation. We need to be clear why we are doing the job evaluation. Second is we need to take the cooperation of the employees, because it is employees who will give very significant data about what all is involved in this job, what all is involved in this kind of responsibility. So, we need to involve their cooperation, we need to get their cooperation, because many a time it happens generally a committee is constituted to conduct the job evaluation, and when people start job evaluation, employees who are observing at times feel suspicious that probably their jobs will be evaluated, that can be further rationalized, they might be given more responsibilities, they might be facing a logic by the committee that their compensable factor probably has lesser market value, so their salary can be reduced, all kind of suspicion are possible. So, it is important to convey to the employees that job evaluation is not going to adversely affect their compensation, and it is important for performance management and proper rationalized salary administration. So, that ensures that any suspicion goes away of the employees. Next step is choosing the evaluation committee. Generally committee is of 3 to 4 people drawn from the employee side. Generally management or owners do not sit in the evaluation committee. They generally identified 10 to 15 key benchmark jobs, and those jobs have to be studied more carefully to understand the different job elements, different job evaluation points in those. After the evaluation committee identifies the benchmark job, it is the job of the evaluation committee to actually perform the job evaluation. Job evaluation, there are different methods possible. First and most simplistic is the ranking method. Job classification is the most common method. Point method and job comparison methods are also used. First we will look at evaluation method, ranking method. Ranking each job relative to other job, that is the essence of this method. Steps in ranking is, first obtain the job information in terms of the job demands or compensable factors. What all is involved in this particular job. Selecting the group jobs, shop floor workers, clerical job, operations, sales in retail banking. So, after identifying the jobs, key position, they select the job groups, they select the groups of the jobs. Selecting the compensable factors. compensable factors, as I shared, they can be skill, knowledge, working conditions, or the criticality of the job, responsibility. Based on the compensable factor, they can rank the job, what is the most important, what is most valuable, and then lesser and then lesser. That is how we can come up, that is how the ranking is done for the jobs. Generally different members of the evaluation committee give the rank to different jobs. Finally, the average of the ranks given by the different managers for a particular job is taken as the final number in their rank. That is then compared with the current pay with the market rate, and then the pay scale is assigned. We can understand this with one example. This is one example of a healthcare center. This healthcare center can have one office manager, chief nurse, bookkeeper, nurse, cook, nurses aide. So you can see the complexity of the job decreases from level 1 to level 6, and accordingly they have been ranked and their salary is decided. Job classification, as I told you, is the most common method of job evaluation. Here the raters categorize the jobs into groups or classes. Classes meaning those groups which contain the similar jobs. Grades are those groups which contains different jobs but otherwise similar in terms of the complexity. So machinist, mechanic, welder, electrician, they might be clubbed in the same grade, and class is like administrative assistants. So that is one class which has the jobs very similar to each other. Jobs are classed by the amount or level of compensable factors. How much knowledge, interpersonal skills, is there a need for supervision, or does the job require supervision, how much judgment is involved, how much risk is involved. These are the factors related to the compensable factors, and based on these jobs are ranked and clubbed in the classes. Job evaluation can be done on the point method as well. This is a very quantitative method. This involves identifying the degree to which each compensable factor is present. We can have common compensable factors, and we can look at how much intensity and what is the level of complexity of that compensable factor. Accordingly, we can give and we can assign some numbers. So just for example, judgment. Does the job involve judgment at day to day level? Does the job involve judgment of routine kind? Does the job involve judgment of a complex type? So accordingly we can assign some numbers to those compensable factors. At the end, all the numbers are counted pertaining to all the compensable factors. The job which has highest number of compensable factors, which has highest points, is considered to be the most complicated job, and accordingly different jobs are clubbed and bands are created or grades are created. So as we mentioned that we can identify the grades after doing the job analysis using point method, ranking method, and then we have to do classification, then pricing the each pay grade according to the wage curve. Wage curve shows the pay rates paid for jobs in each pay grade relative to points or ranking assigned to each job or grade by job evaluation. Pay grade actually shows the relationship between value of the job as determined by one of the job evaluation methods and current average pay rate for your grades. So you can understand by this example. This is an example of plotting the wage curve. You can see the dots are the points. How we arrived at point? We arrived at point by combining compensable factor and the level of complexity involved within that compensable factor. Based on that, we identify the points for different jobs. Those jobs, those points are plotted against the average pay rate. If some job involves, for example, programming, then we need to look at programming is the middle level of complexity, and for those kind of jobs generally if the pay rate is $6 per hour, something like, for example, we have given, and accordingly all the jobs are plotted in the graph of average pay and point, and then we will see can there be a straight line which can cover most of the points. There will always be some points which will not be exactly on the line, they would be above and below the line. So, that is why we need to do the fine tuning, and in the fine tuning we need to create a range. In the range you can have multiple points, closely located multiple points in that graph, they constitute one band, and then we have to do the correction out of the line rates, because there will always be some jobs which are very distant from the ideal line of regression. So, about those jobs we need to do the special treatment, we need to look at how they can be clubbed with other, and we need to identify the rationale and the logic based on the strategy of the organization and the market condition, criticality of their job, we need to put them in some specific grades. So, after we do the wage adjustment to the outliers, a wage structure generally looks like this. It has like 6 bands which covers the range of salary. Pricing the managerial and professional jobs also follows similar logic. It has more important components, more critical components of the short term incentives, long term incentives, and the special perks and benefits. Let us talk about the salary of the CEOs. CEO pay is now, it is not normally accepted practice that it is set by the board of directors if company is listed. Generally a compensation committee is constituted, it is a subcommittee in the board of directors that take into account the factors of the business strategy, corporate trends, where they want, what are the short term and long term objectives. So, based on these factors generally a CEO salaries are decided. Firms pay CEOs based on the complexity of the job. If there are multiple divisions, many product lines, market is very dynamic, naturally they want more competent person, and that person naturally will expect a much better compensation, because that is the person who can influence the fate of the organization, who can have a major impact on the profitability, success, survival or lack of it of the business organization. Boards are reducing the relative importance of base salary while boosting the emphasis on the performance based pay for the CEO compensations. So, CEO has a very significant component which is based on their performance, because organizations appoint heroes as CEOs expecting that will have very significant impact on the overall organizational performance. CEO salary has been matter of debate for so many years. One group talks about holding no bar on the salary of the CEO, on the appointing the most competent, most dynamic person as CEO irrespective of however the person demands or irrespective of whatever amount we have to pay to him. Another group talks about the difference in the CEO and the average median salary of the employees of the organization. They are the people who say that the salary difference must not be very blatant. There should be a limitation of the salary difference between the CEO salary and the salary being given to the frontline worker. So, there are both the type of arguments are present. One of the CEO survey suggests conducted by AFL-CIO Labour Federation, the average chief executive of the Standard & Poor 500 company earned 287 times more than their median employee. So, you can see the the difference in the CEO and the salary of the median employee is very high, 287 times. So, in a company, in an organization where median salary might be 6 lakh rupees or 5 lakh rupees in India, or it can be $30,000 in the dollar terms, CEO might be earning $96 million, $40 million, and so that is the kind of range of this difference between the CEO salary and median salary is present. However, in the another survey we have found that CEO with the highest 20% compensation produced stock returns 60% greater than other firms in the industry. So, there is a survey finding which suggests that the best paid CEO actually are found to be associated with the companies which are outperforming their peers in the market. So, that is the complicated issue about the CEO salary, but we need to know the general practice that it has to be done by the board of directors. We need to look at their strategy, long term, short term objectives, expectation of the organization, and then comes the corporate governance issues. Compensating the professional employees, how to compensate a designer or analyst, because designer might be wonderful, but the success of the product depends on how organization actually produces the stuff based on that design, or analyst has to be creative, must be insightful, but whether insight and the creativity is being valued by organization, whether organization works on that insight, that is something which is dependent on many other managerial factors. So, how we compensate for the best designer or best analyst, that question is generally settled based on the market rate. Employer can use the job evaluation and they can look at the professional jobs, they can look at the compensable factors like problem solving, creativity, job scope, technical knowledge, expertise. Then firm need to use the point method and the factors comparison method, which looks at different components of creativity, job scope, problem solving, etc. in different kind of professional jobs, and they need to constantly compare that with the other players in the market to look at how market is compensating. Generally organizations try to give slightly more than the median market salary to their employee, but most of the employer make efforts like this. As a result of that, that median point in the marketplace keeps increasing. You might remember in the very first session we discussed the competency maturity model or capability maturity model, and in that we looked at level 3 of the CMM model is based on the competency mapping. The systems and processes of HR should be based on the competency mapping of the employees, that is the essential nature and expectation at CMM level 3. Compensation can also be linked to CMM level 3 if we do it based on the competencies requirement in every job. So, competencies, as we discussed in the second session, are the demonstrable characteristics of the knowledge, skill and attitude, and payment for the employees range, depth and type of skill and knowledge is decided when we look at competency as the foundation or as a basis of which on which salary is decided. Competency based pay we have to use because it supports the high performance work system. Workforce in many organizations do not identify themselves with the employer brand, they identify themselves as professional of the healthcare, profession of the bankers, professional identity of analyst or technocrat. So, they do not compare themselves with the people having similar job in the similar organization, they are constantly comparing themselves with their with the professional fraternity, and that makes them very prone to look at the external equity. So, supporting the strategic aim and supporting the performance management, that is essential for the knowledge workers, but that all has to be in the context of the market and with the objective of making workplace high performance work system. Competence based practice, the main element of this is a system that defines specific skills. So, we cannot have the competency based pay scale without sound competency mapping done in the organization for most of the jobs or most of the critical jobs of the organization. There has to be a training system using which, or learning and development system using which employee can acquire this skill. I can map this skill, but if employee do not have the opportunity, and facilities to enhance his or her skills, they will not feel motivated, and then we may not achieve the performance management objectives. There has to be a formal competency system in place, and then work design method should be used that let the employee move among jobs to permit work assignment flexibility. There are benefits and there are challenges using competency based practices, competency based pay in practice. The challenges are that we need to have thorough competency map available, a well functioning learning and OD system available for employee to move from one level of competency to the another level of competency. There has to be the process of the scientific process of competency testing system, and also availability of work design tests, so that employee can take that work design test, apply for the other jobs and have the flexibility, have the opportunity to move to the other jobs just focusing on their competency. So, these are the challenges, these are the requisites, but the benefit is that the competency based pay is very scientific, and it is a dynamic and quick process, because we can keep looking at the competencies required for the organization, we can communicate people about those competency, and that gives them clear idea what they need to develop, what they need to do to be more value adding contributor to the organizational strategic objective. So, that gives a very high level of clarity to the employees about what they need to do, where they need to develop. So, there is a substantial element of the feedback in the competency based pay practice, and that is and we know that feedback is a motivation factor, it is a motivator in the Hertzberg hygiene motivation theory. We have already discussed this slide, the pros and cons of the competencies based thing. There are other compensation trends we must be aware of. First is broadbanding, consolidating the salary grades and ranges into just few wide levels. With the increasing technology, we are seeing more and more flatter organization structure. We are also seeing that the changing nature of technology makes many jobs redundant and makes people to learn new skills. As a result of that, the skill gap requirement, the skill gaps amongst the employee can be reducing in a dynamic work environment. For that kind of work environment, we need to constantly do the broadbanding, so that multiple jobs can be accommodated in the single band, because they might be of similar level of complexity, but there might be variety in the job, but the complexity might be of similar kind, and for which kind of job competency person goes depends on his or her inclination. So, to support that movement across the jobs, we have to do broadbanding. Pros and cons of broadbanding are there. It makes the system more flexible, more flexibility is available in the broadbanding because it assigns the workers to the different job grades. It promotes skill learning and mobility. It provides support for flatter hierarchy and teams, and it lacks the permanence in the job responsibility and can be unsettling to the new jobs, because if constantly new competencies requirements are coming and in a dynamic environment people are constantly upgrading, building their competency, they are keep moving from one job to the other, it might give a sense of there might be a sense of lack of permanence in some employees. So, that these are the pros and cons of broadbanding. This is an example of broadbanding. We look at the 6 pay grades. Those 6 pay grades might have to be combined into broad bands if organization goes towards more flatter structure. Comparable worth is another important concept. It refers to requirement to pay man and women equal wages for dissimilar jobs that are of comparable value to the employer. Comparable worth, this principle seek to address the issue that women have jobs that are dissimilar to those of men, and those jobs are often consistently valued less than men's jobs. So, that issue of similarity of the gender equality must be addressed, and that is the principle behind the comparable worth concept in the job. Pay gap, the factor lowering the earning of the women, that is caused by many factors. It is caused because women's starting salaries are traditionally lower. The salary increase for women in professional job do not reflect their above average performance. Many times this is seen, and many research studies are supporting it. In white collar jobs, men change jobs more frequently, and that enables them to get promotion faster to the higher level, and that makes also women in less advantageous position, and as a result we are seeing lesser much lesser number of women at the higher level of hierarchy in business organizations. In the blue collar jobs, women tend to be placed in the department with the lower paying jobs, because the compensable factors associated in the high skilled jobs at the soft floor are considered to be difficult and not suitable in many situations, not suitable for the women, and mostly men are employed over there. So, these are some of the factors because of which are causing the lower earning of women. Improving productivity, we are looking at HR information system, IT based or automation system in all the HR processes. The automation of the HRIS using HR information system and automation of the salaries and wage compensation is also possible. It has its immense benefits. It allows quick updation of the compensation program. It eliminates the cost of formerly manual processes. Large number of people are required in an organization which have to calculate the salary and compensation manually for the large number of employee. So, the HRIS can take care of that process and can reduce the manual work to a great extent. When we have a well functioning HRIS and automated system, it also helps in coordination of the regional budgets and the centralized budget. It can integrate and automatically administer the other pay actions like PF reduction or HRA calculation or other kind of incentive inclusions. Zing HR is one example of the cloud based HR software application which is popular in India. In many organizations this is being used for the automation of the compensation. HUSIS is a service provider which provides the salary and compensation service to the medium sized corporations. So, many a time small and medium sized corporations cannot dedicate one manpower or few manpower, few employees only for the wage and salary administration. So, they can give their expectations, budget etc. to the organization like HUSIS. There are other organizations as well, and these organizations do the salary and compensation for these medium sized corporations. In nutshell, we understand that compensation system is the combination of fixed versus variable pay, short term versus long term compensation, cash versus equity, individual versus group, and financial and non financial component. So, in this session we looked at the ways of approaching, ways of deciding the basic pay. In the next session we are going to discuss how the financial and non financial incentives other than the basic pay are determined and calculated, how they are being used to facilitate organization to achieve their strategic objectives. Thank you very much. Namaste.